you stand on the precipice of a royal nightmare, where the cries of infants echo with the whispers of power and the shadow of a king's desperate ambition. Imagine, if you will, the suffocating weight of expectation that descended upon every woman who dared to enter the bedchamber of King Henry VIII. Not merely the expectation of love or companionship, but the crushing demand for a son, an heir, a living guarantee of the Tudor dynasty's future. This was the gilded cage of Hampton Court, a palace of unparalleled splendour, yet one where the most profound human desires were twisted into political necessities. From the moment Catherine of Aragon, the devout and dignified Queen, first arrived in England, her destiny was inextricably linked to the production of a male heir. She'd given Henry a daughter, the Princess Mary, a bright and intelligent child, but in the eyes of a king desperate for a son, a daughter was merely a placeholder, a temporary comfort. The royal nurseries, meant to be havens of joy, became instead monuments to disappointment, miscarriage after miscarriage, stillbirth after stillbirth, each tiny, unfulfilled life a hammer blow to Henry's pride and a deepening crack in Catherine's heart. The air itself seemed to hum with the unspoken question, if this was the fate of a queen, what chance did ordinary women have? This question, a chilling echo from the past, sets the stage for the dark saga we're about to unravel. King Henry VIII in his prime was a man of immense charisma and formidable will. But beneath the veneer of royal authority lay a profound insecurity, fueled by the historical instability of the English throne. The Wars of the Roses, a brutal civil conflict, were still a living memory, and the Tudor claim to the crown, though solidified by his father, felt fragile without a male successor. He saw his lack of a son not as a personal tragedy, but as a divine curse, a judgment for his marriage to Catherine, his brother's widow. This belief, nurtured by theological arguments and his own growing impatience, would set in motion a chain of events that would shatter lives and reshape a nation. Princess Mary, a child of keen intellect and deep piety, grew up amidst this suffocating pressure. She was her mother's solace, a living testament to Catherine's unwavering faith and resilience. Yet, even as a young girl, Mary understood the precariousness of her position. Her very existence as a female heir was a constant reminder of her father's unfulfilled desire. She witnessed her mother's quiet suffering, the public humiliation, and the relentless campaign to invalidate her parents' marriage. The lavish court, with its tournaments and feasts, masked a brutal reality. In the Tudor world, even royal children were pawns in a dangerous game of power and succession. The early 16th century, a time of burgeoning renaissance and shifting global powers, offered little comfort to those caught in the maelstrom of royal ambition. In England, the Tudor court was the epicenter of power, a place where fortunes were made and lost with a single royal decree. The fate of Catherine of Aragon, and by extension, Princess Mary, was not merely a domestic affair. It was a matter of international diplomacy, religious doctrine, and dynastic survival. The empty cradle, a symbol of Henry's desperate longing, became a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy, a stark reminder that even within the opulent walls of Hampton Court, the most precious of lives could be sacrificed on the altar of power. The stage was set for a drama of unprecedented scale, where the children of a king would become unwitting victims in a brutal struggle for dominance. The king's obsession with a legitimate male heir, it wasn't just a personal desire anymore. It escalated into a national crisis, a crisis that would tear apart a marriage, challenge the very fabric of religious authority, and forever reshape England. This was the King's Great Matter from 1527 to 1533. Henry VIII embarked on a relentless pursuit, an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. His argument? That his marriage to his brother's widow was unlawful in God's eyes, but Catherine, devout and unyielding, refused to concede. She stood firm, a symbol of unwavering faith, even as the world around her crumbled. Her silence was a betrayal to Henry, her steadfastness a defiance he could not tolerate. And as the king's patience wore thin, a new figure emerged from the shadows of the court, Anne Boleyn. Anne, intelligent, ambitious, and captivating. She became the focal point of Henry's affections and his hopes. But her rise was inextricably linked to Catherine's fall, and the Pope. Clement VII found himself caught between a powerful king and the unshakable doctrines of the Church. The Vatican, once the supreme authority, was now under immense pressure. Cardinal Wolsey Henry's chief minister, once all-powerful, found his influence waning. He had promised the king an annulment, but the Pope's refusal sealed Wolsey's fate. His failure paved the way for a new kind of power, a new kind of minister, Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell, pragmatic and ruthless, understood Henry's desperation. He saw a path, not through Rome, but through revolution. The English Reformation was born, not from theological purity, but from a king's desire for a son and a new queen. The impact of these events on Princess Mary was devastating. Once the legitimate heir, the beloved daughter of a queen, she was now declared illegitimate, her future uncertain, precarious, and filled with peril. Her mother's suffering, her own disinheritance. These were not just political manoeuvres, they were deeply personal betrayals. Mary watched in silent anguish as her world was torn apart, her faith, her lineage, her very identity questioned and undermined. This period, from 1527 to 1533, was a crucible. It forged a New England, but at an immense human cost. The contrast was stark. Catherine's quiet devotion against Henry's raging ambition, tradition against revolution, and at the heart of it all, the children, caught in the crossfire. The rosary, a symbol of Catherine's unwavering faith and suffering, and the bee necklace, a glittering emblem of Anne's rising influence and ambition. These objects, seemingly small, carried immense symbolic weight. They were silent witnesses to the escalating drama, the betrayal, and the profound shifts in power. What would be the ultimate cost of this defiance? What would become of the royal children in this new, fractured England? The stage was set for even greater tragedy, and the echoes of the King's Great Matter would reverberate for generations to come. Anne Boleyn, once the King's great hope, now found herself ensnared in the same desperate cycle of expectation and disappointment. Her coronation, a spectacle of triumph, but the birth of a daughter, Princess Elizabeth, was not the victory Henry had craved. The falcon had reached the apex of its flight, but the descent would be swift and brutal. From 1533 to 1536, Anne's position as queen grew increasingly precarious. She had promised Henry a son, a promise she was now desperate to fulfill. But hope turned to despair. Miscarriage after miscarriage, each one a blow to her standing and a chilling echo of Catherine's fate. The court, once her stage of triumph, now became a web of intrigue and betrayal. Her sharp wit, once her greatest asset, now made her powerful enemies. And Thomas Cromwell, the architect of her rise, now began to orchestrate her downfall. Lady Rochford, Jane Boleyn, Anne's own sister-in-law, she became a key instrument in the plot against the Queen. Whispers of infidelity, of witchcraft, of incest. These poisonous rumours spread through the court and reached the ears of a king already consumed by paranoia. Henry, once so captivated by Anne, now saw her as a curse, a woman who had bewitched him and failed to give him a son. His love turned to hatred, his desire to disgust. And so, the Falcon's fall began. In May of 1536, the Queen was arrested and taken to the Tower of London, the very place where she had awaited her coronation. Now, it was to be her prison and her final stage. The charges against her were a grotesque fabrication, but the outcome was never in doubt. Anne Boleyn, the second Queen of England, was condemned to die. The executioner's axe, a chilling contrast to the delicate falcon brooch. It was the ultimate instrument of royal power and the final, brutal end to Anne's ambitions. Her death left another royal child, vulnerable. Princess Elizabeth, now declared illegitimate, just as her half-sister Mary had been. Another child, another victim, in the relentless pursuit of a male heir. The psychological unravelling of the court, the emotional shock of the Queen's execution. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the ruthlessness of power. The triumph had turned to terror, hope to despair, and the fate of Anne Boleyn served as a chilling cliffhanger, a warning to all who dared to enter the treacherous world of the Tudor court. What would become of Elizabeth, and who would be the next to face the king's wrath? The unquiet cradle remained empty, and the shadow of the king's ambition grew ever longer and darker. After years of turmoil, of bloodshed, and of desperate hope, it finally happened. In 1537, a son was born. Prince Edward, the golden boy, the long-awaited male heir. The kingdom rejoiced. Henry was ecstatic. For a fleeting moment, there was stability and hope. The Tudor dynasty seemed secure. Jane Seymour, the third queen, had succeeded where others had failed. She had given the king his son, but the joy was to be short-lived, for the shadow of death still lingered in the royal birthing chambers. Just days after the birth, Jane fell gravely ill. The joy of birth was cruelly contrasted with the sorrow of death. Maternal grief, a recurring theme in this dark history, struck once again. But this time, it was the Queen herself who was the victim. Jane Seymour, the Queen who had brought such hope, was dead. Her death was a profound emotional shock to the king and to the nation. She was the only one of Henry's wives to be buried with him, a testament to the love he bore her and the son she had given him. The christening gown, a symbol of new life, and the death mask, a symbol of ultimate sacrifice. These two objects tell the story of this brief and tragic chapter. But what of the fragile heir? What would become of the golden boy, now left motherless? The court remained a place of brutal politics. Even a male heir did not guarantee an end to the king's anxieties. The birth of Edward did not bring the lasting peace Henry had craved. Instead, it opened a new chapter of uncertainty. Mary and Elizabeth, though now further down the line of succession, remained key players in the ongoing drama. Their lives still hung in the balance, subject to the whims of their father and the machinations of the court. The golden boy had arrived, but the shadow of death and the spectre of instability had not been banished. In fact, they had only grown longer and darker. The unquiet cradle was no longer empty, but the peace it brought was as fragile as the infant prince himself, and the question remained: what would be the ultimate fate of Henry's children? The answer lay in the years to come, in the shifting sands of succession, and in the ever-present threat of a king's unpredictable wrath. The sands of time were running out for King Henry VIII. With his health declining, the question of succession, once again, became the most pressing issue in the kingdom. The precarious positions of his 3 children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, became increasingly apparent. 3 children, 3 different mothers, 3 different faiths. Their fates were intertwined, yet their paths were divergent. This section delves into the complex and often contradictory succession acts, laws that were written and rewritten to suit the king's ever-changing whims. The royal seal, the instrument of changing laws and fates, it was a constant reminder that the children's legitimacy, their very lives, depended on the stroke of a pen. Who would survive? Who would rule? The suspense was palpable. The political manoeuvring around the young heirs was relentless. Factions formed, alliances shifted, and betrayals were commonplace. Thomas Cromwell, though long gone, had set a precedent. Power was a game, and the children were the pawns. Elizabeth, in particular, learned to navigate this treacherous world with caution and intelligence. Her quiet pursuit of knowledge, her hidden books, they were her armour and her escape. She watched and she learned as the sands of succession shifted beneath her feet. Mary remained a steadfast Catholic, a symbol of the old order. Her faith was her strength, but it also made her a target. And Edward, the golden boy, the heir apparent, he was a child, easily manipulated by the powerful men around him. Royal power versus personal vulnerability, political games versus innocent lives. The contrast was stark and brutal. As Henry's life drew to a close, the future of England hung in the balance. The shifting sands of succession had created a landscape of uncertainty and fear. Who would emerge from the chaos? Who would claim the throne? The open loop, the unanswered question, left the kingdom on a knife's edge. The fates of Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward were about to be decided, and the legacy of their father, a legacy of blood and power, would shape their destinies in ways they could not yet imagine. With Henry VIII's death in 1547, the crown passed to his only son, Edward VI, a boy of just 9 years old. His reign, though brief, was marked by intense religious upheaval and the relentless machinations of his regents. The fragile sceptre was now in the hands of a child, and around him, ambitious men sought to consolidate power and further the Protestant cause. Chief among them, the Duke of Northumberland, he saw in the young king an opportunity. The Protestant Reformation, which Henry had initiated for personal gain, now became a fervent ideological crusade. Churches were stripped of their Catholic adornments, and dissenters were persecuted. This was a period of intense religious zeal, but also of political opportunism. But the young king's health was failing. Edward, always a sickly child, grew weaker with each passing month. His illness became a ticking clock for those who sought to control the succession. Northumberland, desperate to maintain his power, hatched a desperate plan. He sought to alter the succession, to exclude Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. His chosen successor, Lady Jane Grey, Edward's Protestant cousin, and Northumberland's daughter-in-law, but the attempts to exclude his half-sisters would ultimately fail. Mary Tudor, with her unwavering Catholic faith, rallied support, and the people, weary of religious upheaval and political manipulation, sided with her. Edward's failing health and the ensuing chaos led to a desperate struggle for the throne. The youthful idealism of the young king was crushed by the harsh reality of power politics, the blood-stained Bible, a testament to the violent religious conflicts that defined this period. It was a betrayal in silence, as those closest to the king plotted his sister's downfall. Edward VI died in 1553 at the age of 15. His brief reign, a tragic testament to the burden of a crown and the ruthless pursuit of power, his death marked the end of the male Tudor line and opened the door for a new chapter in the bloody saga of Henry VIII's children. The stage was set for Mary's brutal reign and the ultimate test of Elizabeth's resilience. Edward's death plunged England into a brief but brutal power struggle, but from the chaos emerged Mary Tudor, the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She claimed her rightful place on the throne. Mary's reign was a stark contrast to her father's later years and her brother's Protestant zeal. She sought to restore Catholicism with a fervour that earned her the chilling moniker Bloody Mary. Her psychological unravelling, the long-term effects of her childhood, her mother's humiliation, her own disinheritance, all contributed to a reign defined by religious persecution and a desperate longing for an heir. The personal cost versus the political gain. Mary's reign was a tragic testament to the enduring legacy of her father's obsession. But Mary's reign, too, was short-lived, and upon her death in 1558, the throne passed to her half-sister, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's rise from illegitimate child to powerful queen was nothing short of miraculous. She had navigated the treacherous waters of the Tudor court with a shrewdness and resilience that defied her tumultuous upbringing. The broken crown of Henry VIII now rested on a new head. Elizabeth, the Phoenix Queen, rose from the ashes of her family's turmoil. She learned from the mistakes of her predecessors, from her father's tyranny, her mother's tragic fall, and her sister's brutal reign. Her strategic reign, a masterclass in political manoeuvring and national unity. She understood the delicate balance of power and the importance of a stable succession. The legacy of Henry VIII was one of profound human cost. His obsession with succession, his ruthless pursuit of power, they had shattered lives and reshaped a nation. But in the end, his children, Mary and Elizabeth, though scarred by their past, forged their own paths to the throne, their fates inextricably linked to the brutal pursuit of power, but ultimately they transcended it. The story of Henry VIII's lost children is a chilling reminder that even in the most gilded of cages the cries of infants can echo with the whispers of power, and the shadow of a king's ambition can cast a long and dark legacy.